I'd like to introduce you to one of my Christian heroes, the great Puritan preacher Richard Baxter, who was born in 1615 and died in 1691. He was a wonderful servant of Jesus Christ, and his books have influenced me greatly on a whole range of subjects to do with the Christian faith. So this video will serve as an introduction to what I hope to share with you in the time to come, a series of bite-sized Baxter, clips of extracts from his writings, not too lengthy, which I hope will bring blessing to you and an encouragement to you to investigate his works, which have so much to say to us at the present time, the present state of the church. We need men like Richard Baxter, who was such a Bible-based Christian man. First of all, I just share with you what some people in the past said about him. The chemist Robert Boyle, for example, he declared, "Mr. Baxter is the fittest man of the age for a casuist, that is, someone who can sort out problems of conscience, because he feared no man's displeasure, nor hoped for any man's preferment." In the opinion of Joseph Glanville, who was a Fellow of the Royal Society and later Rector of Bath, Richard Baxter was, quote, "a person worthy of great respect, and that he was the only man that spake sense in an age of nonsense." In an early letter to Baxter, Glanville had this to say about the eloquent Puritan's books: "When you deal in practical subjects, I admire your affectionate, piercing, heart-affecting quickness, and that experimental, searching, solid, convictive way of speaking which are your peculiars. For there is a smartness accompanying your pen that forces what you write into the heart by a sweet kind of irresistible violence, which is so proper to your serious way, that I never met it equalled in any other writings." So much for Baxter's practical works, which many would similarly applaud. What then of the polemical or the controversial works? And he wrote many of those too. Glanville was no less enthusiastic, and when you are engaged in doctrinal and controversial matters, I find a strength, depth, concinnity, which means harmony, and coherence in your notions, which are not commonly elsewhere met with. Well, that's enough commendation to start with, but there's more to share with you. Matthew Sylvester, his pastoral friend, he would also speak very positively. He even called Richard Baxter, who was his mentor in many respects, he called him England's Elijah. Now that's really is high praise. And if, as endorsed by another friend of Baxter, Dr. William Bates, Bishop Wilkins thought he stood alongside the early church fathers. And Dr. Thomas Manton, a Puritan brother of Richard Baxter, he declared in the hearing of several that he thought Mr. Baxter came nearer the apostolical inspired writers than any man in the age. How about that for commendation? And then a little later, towards the end of the 17th and the early 18th century, Dr. Edmund Calamy, who was a minister in London, he concluded, quote, that there are no writings that have more of a true Christian spirit, a greater mixture of judgment and affection, or a greater tendency to revive pure, undefiled religion that have been more esteemed abroad or more blessed at home for the awakening the secure, instructing the ignorant, confirming the wavering, comforting the dejected, recovering the profane, or improving such as are truly serious, than the practical works of this author. That's Dr. Edmund Calamy. And then in the mid-18th century, Dr. Philip Doddridge, the dissenting pastor and tutor in Northampton, he shared Calamy's enthusiasm. Doddridge said, "Baxter is my particular favourite. I cannot indeed forbear looking upon him as one of the greatest orators that our nation ever produced. He discovers a manly eloquence and the most evident proofs of an amazing genius, with respect to which he may not improperly be called the English Demosthenes," and Demosthenes was a mighty Greek orator in ancient times. Doddridge concludes, "Baxter's works are very proper for conviction. Few were ever instrumental of awakening more souls." In the 19th century, another admirer of Richard Baxter, A.B. Grosshart, the Scottish theologian, he wrote that Baxter is said to have drawn more hearts to the great bleeding heart than any other Englishman of his age. And then, closer to our own time, in the 20th century, the late Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones was certain that, quote, "when we speak of Baxter at Kidderminster, we are entitled to speak of revival." So with commendations like that, how can one resist reading about Baxter? Well, he wrote many books, about 141 altogether. Over the decades, various editions have been produced. And I published this last year, containing two of Baxter's shorter works. But to conclude my introductory video today, I just give you a couple of snippets from Baxter himself to give you a taste of what may be found in the books of this wonderful servant of Jesus Christ. In his very first book, published in 1649, Richard Baxter wrote, "The love of God to the world was the first womb where the work of redemption was conceived," John 3:16. And then in his most famous book, The Saints' Everlasting Rest, published in 1650, he wrote, "Consider what Christ did towards the saving of souls. He thought them worth his blood, and shall we not think them worth our breath? Will you not do a little where Christ hath done so much?" Now there's a challenge for us as modern Christians. And then he had this to say about Christian preachers: "Nothing is more indecent than a dead preacher speaking to dead hearers the living truths of the living God." And Baxter himself, he practiced what he preached. He said, "I preached as never sure to preach again, and as a dying man to dying men." Well, there's just a few snippets of what is available in the writings of Richard Baxter. And this book, my book, it is available on Amazon for £10. God bless you as you explore the life and labours of Richard Baxter. Amen.